Harms, reporter for CoStar News Hotels, and I'm here with Friedman, CEO of Peachtree Group. So we've got a lot to discuss here. Here at Alice, we're talking a lot about 2025. It was not the year anybody wanted or expected. For Peachtree, what were some of the highs and lows for last year? And, how did you navigate the company to kind of mitigate some of these unexpected challenges?
Yeah, so 2025 was a very challenging business environment. As you know, it was very chaotic. It was very volatile, especially from a hotel perspective. I think one of the ways we were able to mitigate it is that we're pretty diversified across our investments because it's not just hotels. And within hotels, we invest on the equity side as well as the credit side. The credit side proved to be a little bit more resilient in 2025 versus the equity side. And we were able to deploy capital, I would say, on a more scalable level on the credit side as it relates to hotels. But we're also invested across other property types, and some of the other asset types performed better in 2025, not to mention we do some stuff outside of real estate. So it was, although it was a very challenging year, and unfortunately I think 2026 may share some of those same challenges, but us as a firm, we were able to still go out and execute and do over $3 billion of direct lending across the hotel space, as well as outside of hotel properties. And then simultaneously on the equity side, as it relates to just hotels, we were able to, we had 7 development projects that we were able to deliver in 2025, and we were able to also acquire 5 assets, surprisingly, even with all the challenges and between having less foreign demand here locally for here in the U.S. for lodging, and with the challenges with the government demand being down substantially, we still were able to find deals that we could make sense.
Yeah, well, factoring in 2025 and knowing that some of these trends might continue, at least early in the year, what are your expectations for Peachtree in 2026 and maybe even broadly the industry as a whole?
Yeah, so I think 2026 is going to be somewhat similar to 2025 as we're transitioning. We continue to transition over the last 3 years, where there was that saying, going back 4 years ago about survive to 2025. And I feel like now it's about grinding it out till 2029, because it's going to take several years to really recover from this higher for longer long-term interest rate environment. So we're still recalibrating to that environment, and that's what has been a impediment to the transaction market. I do think that you're going to see more transactions occur in 2026, which is good for our lending business. It's also good for the equity side of our house when we're looking to acquire assets. I think there'll be the ability to buy a lot more assets opportunistically in 2026 as well.
Yeah, I think the breaking news for Peachtree that came out just ahead of the conference is the acquisition of First Western, which I know is a special deal for you. And what was the impetus for the deal, and how does that deal factor in kind of to Peachtree's larger company goals?
So it's really more of a focus on us trying to grow out our lending, and credit capabilities, and being able to serve small businesses. So the SBA lending the platform we bought has historically been out there doing direct lending under the SBA 7A program. It's something I was very familiar with because my grandfather originally started the business, but it's something that I think that we can be able to go in and actually be able to serve these smaller business owners that are acquiring hotel properties, acquiring other type of businesses, and be able to provide financing. So it's just our ability as a platform to continue to diversify our offerings, so we're able to weather the storm as we go through these different economic environments.
Yeah. Well, last summer, Peachtree announced the Peachtree Special Situations Fund, which, tell me a little bit about that deal, why the timing was right for that, and then, kind of your strategy and how that's going.
Yeah, so Special Situations is more focused on buying assets that have broken capital stacks. And I just think, as I sort of mentioned, there's so many assets that have been impacted by this higher for longer long-term interest rate environment. And a lot of assets are over leveraged. They may need preferred equity. It may be that lenders are looking to sell assets, and the Special Situations Fund is set up so it can be able to go execute on those types of opportunities. And so it's something that we're focused on right now, is going out and working with different financial institutions, working with different owners of hotel assets to help them recap assets through our Special Situations Fund. So it's something we're super excited about, because we see this wall of debt maturities So you have about $1 trillion of commercial real estate loans maturing over the next, year. And a lot of that is hospitality related debt, so it's, hotels make up an outsized portion of it, but the, relative to its, percentage as an asset class. So I think it's just, there's a huge opportunity within hotels, but also across some of the other, commercial real estate property types as well.
Mm-hmm. I know you mentioned kind of building out this lending platform, but what other deals are you targeting in 2026?
Yeah, so I would say, primarily, I think we're going to be focused on doing a lot of direct lending, providing capital for, assets going through some type of transition. If it's a renovation project, if it's someone developing a new asset or acquiring an asset, doing, first mortgage financing for those acquisitions or, recapitalizations or refinances, that's going to be probably our biggest focus in 2026. As well as, we're focused on acquiring assets that we feel like have good, sustainable, cash flows long term for our DST strategy, and continue to selectively look at development opportunities as well. Because I think there's obviously a lot of challenges within the hotel business. So, and we haven't really talked about the operational side of the hotel industry, but I do believe in the long-term viability of the industry. And there's, a lack of new supply getting built. And I think there's an opportunity to go develop in certain markets that lack that supply.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we haven't talked too much about the operations, but I'm going to go double down on transactions because I wonder, and you can kind of talk beyond Peachtree, but what are your kind of expectations for the transaction market for hotels? I think it's something I'm kind of curious about from your perspective.
Yeah, I think it's going to pick up in 2026 because of that wall of debt maturities. I think, unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of forced sells where people have to either sell their asset because of that loan maturity, or they're going to be forced to have to, refinance the asset. And just given the reset in values and the need for CapEx, because there's been a lack of CapEx spend across the hotel industry since the pandemic. And so that is really going to be the impetus, just given the fact that, most owners are undercapitalized right now for these renovations, and they're not appropriately, they're potentially over leveraged on a lot of these acquisitions they did several years ago. So now they're going to either have to inject a lot of liquidity or be forced to sell assets. And I think that's going to be a situation that's going to help drive new transactions. Not to mention the credit markets continue to remain very robust. So there's capital out there for someone that's buying an asset to get acquisition financing. And so that's, those two components I think will help drive the transaction market in 2026.
Okay, well, we can pivot from talking about transactions and talk about kind of some bigger industry trends you're keeping a close eye on. And this can be, operational trends, travel trends that, make sense to keep tabs on.
Yeah, so I think the biggest trends I'm focused on is where, I would say as it relates to just the financial markets is where interest rates settle, because ultimately that's how you value these assets. So if the 10 years, in my eyes, viewed as the risk-free rate, that's a big benchmark that we focus on, because ultimately that's how you can price assets from a cap rate basis, putting a risk premium spread. I think some of the other factors that we're focused on is just watching what's happening on the operating cost side, because revenues have been flat, and looking for trends as it relates to just what is the future operational costs associated with running these assets. Because when you have flatline revenues, or even revenues in some cases pulling back some, since the economy's been a little bit softer than we expected in 25, as well as we project to be a little bit soft in 26. That's another factor that's impacting the profitability. But with that said, we're also focused, and we're looking at some of the trends on the tech side, like looking at how people are utilizing AI for booking and making decisions, and also starting to look at what's happening just across tech in general to make operating these assets more efficiently.
Yes, well, can't have a conversation without talking about AI, I think, at this point, and it always comes up inevitably. Well, Greg, thank you so much for your time today. It was great catching up.
I really appreciate it. Thank you, Natalie.
Hello, I'm Luke Haynes, People Newsletter Editor, CoStar News, and the host of Top Credentials, a monthly podcast exploring the colourful careers of those working at the top of UK commercial real estate. In the episodes, we discover the valuable lessons influencing the daily decision-making of property sector leaders, and hear about the aspects of their job that make it a little easier to get out of bed each morning. We'll also ask for their views on the latest news and policies shaping our constantly evolving industry, and even get them to share a famous quote or song title they think defines their career or the profession. Listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This episode of the CoStar News Hotels podcast was recorded on January 27th, 2026. It was recorded by Meredith Sheridan and edited for the podcast by me, Natalie Harms. Find all hotel industry news at costar.com/hotelnews. Thanks for listening.